Due to a timetable change, all episodes of Train News will now be released at midnight. Please check before viewing. And we start today with France. Yes, France. The country which... Hang on, I'm turning into the obscure railway version of John Oliver. However, the French government are making some cost-cutting measures, mainly the removal of a certain status that French railway workers have that make them kind of de facto civil servants. The French rail unions have responded to the proposal to remove this status by enacting a programme of industrial action so intense that it makes the driver-door operation crisis look like a wrestle between puppies. The union has adopted a cycle, striking 2 days and working 3. The result has been a complete paralysis of the French rail network, with approximately 1 in 3 trains running, parts of the infrastructure unusable, and knock-on effects in countries to which international services from France, including Thalys and Eurostar, run, namely the UK, Spain, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands and Belgium. This strike coincides with a totally separate dispute between the unions and Air France KLM, which basically means if you're trying to travel anywhere within or via France, you're kind of fucked. Bon voyage, more like bonne chance. In the UK, on the other hand, industrial action has become a bit more random, a bit more sporadic, and you could say that it's losing a bit of its momentum. Although that being said, Northern's reliability has been particularly bad in the last couple of months, so much so that it has prompted Andy Burnham to call for an inquiry into their performance, according to the Manchester Evening News, who really need to understand that Northern Rail doesn't exist. It hasn't existed for 2 years now. But never mind that. Also, passengers who tweeted at the Northern CEO, Liam Sumpter, to complain about the service were quite shocked with his responses, and he's been accused of being rude to complaining passengers. Come on, Liam, that's my job. However, as I've said many times before, a lot of the problems you'll find that are affecting Northern services are actually not down to them, but are mainly down to Network Rail, primarily through their failure to electrify the Bolton-Chorley-Preston line, which I'll get onto later. However, Network Rail have seemed to have adopted a very strange strategy of trying to distract the media with bizarre and unrealistic ambitions, such as running trains 24 hours a day, which is, again, slightly unrealistic given that they're having trouble running trains at all right at the moment, and running trains without timetables, which, again, why would you do that? How would you do that? How would that be possible? I know Northern are too lazy to print them off, but this is a bit of a stretch. Well, there you have it. Next time you read a story in the headlines that's like, Network Rail wants to do this, you're probably best off ignoring it. Not wanting to get left out, the Department for Transport has also come up with some wacky ambitions of its own, namely the elimination of all DMUs by 2040. I mean, I'd personally be impressed if they finished electrifying the Great Western Main Line by 2040. I mean, as we know, the UK is the second worst country in Europe when it comes to electrification projects, the worst being Switzerland, who don't have any because they finished electrifying their railways in the 1920s. There have been some whispers about a possible new general election, which reminds me of the last one in June 2017, shortly after which a long list of electrification cancellations were announced, namely the Midland Main Line, electrification into Bristol, Cardiff to Swansea, and Oxenholme to Windermere, the latter of which was justified by a rather weak excuse of not wanting to put up obtrusive structures in a national park. Idiots. Well, as it turns out, the DfT had decided well in advance of these cancellations, all the way back in March, before the general election was even announced. Unfortunately, the mainstream media were too busy talking about Network Rail running trains without timetables to bother picking up on this, which is a shame, because this should have been a major scandal. Grayling should have been out the door, just like Rudd. And if there really is another general election round the corner, I would hate to find out what cancellations they've already decided on soon afterwards. Speaking of Chris Grayling's failures, let's talk about the Gatwick Airport fiasco, the bloody sequel to the Redhill fiasco in February, in which there were engineering works which were planned well in advance, but the rail company and the rail delivery group both failed miserably to tell passengers about it beforehand, even those who had booked tickets after the engineering was confirmed. essentially meaning passengers were booking on trains which Southern Rail already knew weren't going to run, and passengers received no warning about that whatsoever. And the passengers that did end up at Redhill found that Southern had not provided nearly enough rail replacement buses, leading up to massive queues which delayed everybody by over an hour, with some locals having to give people rides. Well, on the 5th of May, we found out that Southern most certainly did not learn their lesson, with the exact same thing happening at Gatwick Airport, just a whole lot worse. It was a bank holiday weekend, it was the launch of the Brighton Fringe, and yet again, Southern was not prepared whatsoever for the torrent of people who were just trying to get to Brighton. One must question how exactly Southern didn't know that there were going to be a lot of people travelling that day. And yet they just weren't prepared, and by 12:15 Network Rail were already sending them alerts of 4,000 plus people queuing up for rail replacement buses, with a risk of having to close the entire station. Yet it took over an hour for Southern to actually advise their passengers to avoid the route after prompting by the Association of British Commuters. The result was a dangerous queue-up of thousands of people waiting for not enough replacement buses, driven by drivers who didn't know where they were going, and delays of 2+ hours for everybody involved. The entire situation was completely predictable and completely preventable, and yet it still happened thanks to Southern incompetence. In the long term, recognising the issues that Gatwick Airport Station does have, Network Rail has proposed a rebuilding of it, which is great and all, but then I've got to remember that in order to rebuild the station it means more blockades on the line, so I just hope that Southern Rail have actually learned their lesson this time. Oh, and for those of you who didn't know, we now have official confirmation that Southern Rail really does have a policy of not allowing disabled people to board their trains if there's a chance that it might make the train delayed, according to a training document leaked by the Association of British Commuters. Yikes! I mean, on the one hand I'm shocked that this is actually written on a piece of paper, but on the other hand I'm like, well yeah, obviously, that's what they've been doing this whole time. Has that not been completely clear? Either way, this is completely unacceptable. I think we need to have a break from all the bad news and go over to Germany, where things are just better. I mean, incidents still happen, delays on the railway still exist, but they're just better. So let's have a look at the controversial Stuttgart 21 project with its original completion date, uncoincidentally, in 2021. The plan is to replace the terminus station with a new underground through station at right angles to the current station. This essentially is turning Stuttgart into a railway thoroughfare, much like Berlin and Vienna, as part of the overall plan to improve the Paris to Vienna corridor. Well, for all the people complaining about how the UK railways aren't as good as the German railways, you'll probably be quite satisfied to hear that the project is running late and is over budget, with the federal government, the city government and Deutsche Bahn bickering over who has to pay the extra costs. Speaking of over budget, Crossrail. Does anybody have like £500 million lying around? No? Yeah. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Virgin Trains East Coast has collapsed. Well, not quite yet, don't get too excited, but it has been officially announced that on the 24th of June, a new operator, with a brand that somebody's clearly whipped up on MS Paint in 20 minutes, the London North Eastern Railway, will take over. The operator is known as the Operator of Last Resort and will be jointly operated by the Department for Transport and Arup, whatever the hell Arup is. At least until 2020, when a new public-private operator will take over, probably under the same brand. Idiots all over are celebrating this as a victory for nationalisation, when it really isn't. I mean, they literally called it the Operator of Last Resort, come on. So the big question of the day is, did my video ranting about rail fares actually make a difference, or has this been in the works for a while? I don't know, but either way, there is apparently a major fares review set to take place, addressing a number of inconsistencies we have with the ticketing system, and another one which I didn't actually touch on in the last episode, about part-time workers. Say you work 3-4 days a week, there's no season ticket that really caters for you, so that needs to change. Also, Northern, having installed ticket machines on a bunch of Manchester stations, have now started a penalty fares system where you now have to buy before you board at most stations around Manchester, so I guess that's a bit of an improvement. And now we introduce our new segment, Meanwhile in Scotland. Meanwhile in Scotland, the introduction of the Class 385 has been delayed because some idiot at Hitachi Forgot to check that the windscreens don't distort signals at night. You know, something that might be useful if you're driving a train at night. The windscreen is all curved, so now they have to be sent back and redone. In the meantime, Class 365s from Great Northern will briefly cover the gap. Also, there have been some platform extensions going on at Edinburgh Waverley as part of EGIP, although apparently they built all the platforms curved, so now they have to be rebuilt again. Also, despite warnings that manufacturers are all going to flee the UK after Brexit, Siemens seems to be setting up a new factory in the UK, in Goole, probably because they lost a dare. South Kensington Underground Station is set to get an upgrade. It is currently very crowded, a single island platform, but there is a disused platform to the north, and the plan is to convert this disused platform into the new eastbound platform so that the island platform can now become the new westbound platform. A new railway station in Meridian Water is set to become the centrepiece of a new regeneration project in East London. The railway station comes alongside the construction of a third track on the upgraded Lee Valley line to Stratford. Hopefully they've been sensible and left space for a fourth track as well. Angel Road immediately north is set to close, leaving a perfectly good footbridge with nowhere to go. If only there was somewhere on the British railway network in desperate need of a footbridge. Nah, I guess it'll just go to waste. What a shame. Let's have a look at the progress being made on some of the new trains being tested in Velem, namely the Class 195 Civity unit for Northern, the first of which has arrived in the UK by boat, and also Transpennine Express's MK5 coaches. Transpennine Express had to send a couple of Class 68s down to Velem to be tested alongside the coaches. They originally planned to get them there by rail, but once they actually arrived in France, they had to be sent back because of the strike. So they then had to be taken all the way back and then shipped over to Germany by boat. Oh dear. Also, Greater Anglia's Adventures and Stadler Flirt are coming along quite nicely. Since there are no Creative Commons pictures of these available, I'll link you to them so you can see them in the description. Platform work at Derby, the last remains of the Midland Main Line upgrade, since electrification is no longer taking place, is going along quite nicely and will be done in December. Probably. The Manchester Metrolink have decided that 120 is not a rounded enough number, so they've decided to order some more trams, possibly up to 27 of them. So, yay, more trams. And our final story comes from the Heathrow Express, who have thrown in the towel and sold their services to Great Western to be run with Class 387s, so as to negate the need to build a new depot to house the 332s. So add them to the list of trains that need a home. Modern Railways is my source, of course. I'm not sponsored by them, but if you want to send me some money in the post, I wouldn't complain. But no, I mean, if it's, if you're interested enough in railways to have sat through this whole thing, then you might as well go subscribe to them, I guess. Now, you're probably thinking, David, where's all the May 2018 timetable change stuff? This is big news. You're right, it is big news, and that's why I've created a whole other video dedicated just to that, which will be uploaded shortly, / can be found in the description below, depending on when you're watching this. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe. Let's talk about the Gatwick Airport fiasco, the bloody sequel to the Redhill Airport fiasco. Redhill Airport? Oh cool, I can go over there now. Yay. Well, this is nice. And I'm stuck.
Muslims, migrants, immigrants.
Oh, they're coming.
They're coming. They're going to invade Christian Europe. The Jews are controlling everything.
And that's why you should vote for me as Prime Minister. Holy sh**, that actually worked.